What is up, Bears fans? And we are back for another Bears Banter. I'm Michael Carbone, but you can call me Carbs. And I'm back with two of the legends of the Bears, as per always, starting off with Adrian Toole, one of the toughest men in the middle from 1985 to 1995. He was a Bear for life at the top level. And exactly, Daryl. What I remember most, I guess, as a young kid watching Bears games, was that deep Toole chant whenever he took up the ball. So, Adrian, welcome to Bears Banter, mate.
Pleasure to be here, Carbs. Pleasure.
And of course, probably needs no introduction. One of the best goal kickers of all time. He played for the Bears. He, of course, played for the Bulldogs, and he repped the Kiwis as well. Daryl Halligan, welcome to Bears Banter.
No problem. North Sydney Oval had a call for myself too when I was there. So they had Toole for Adrian. And then when I went to run the ball, they used to go, boo!
So that's where that started. I was wondering where the boo chant began.
You just mentioned that there. I had, when we said not to mention, but in 91, when we were playing in the final series, a lot of people, I'm from Forbes originally, so a lot of mates came down from Forbes to watch the game, and we're playing there at the stadium, and every time I took the ball up, they'd big Toole up. My mates thought they were booing me. So one of my mates got in front of this big crowd doing it and told them all shut up, or take them on because they were booing me. But they didn't realise what was happening. I think. So we probably got my call and your call mixed up, mate.
Well, they were booing me that day. Don't worry about that, mate. That's for sure.
We won't talk too much about that day, Daryl, but obviously you had a lot of...
I'm right into it. I would have put North Sydney in their first grand final since 1922, I think the history books wrote. And I was oblivious to any of that. It was my first year of rugby league. I'd only played one season of rugby league, and that was it. And 91 was there. Great season, and then all of a sudden... smack, a big slap in the face to finish the season, and nowhere to go basically with a whole heap of North players and fans.
So we had the following week. We had Canberra the following week. They didn't have a bad side, but they towed us up.
They got us. The game, of course, you're referencing, Daryl, is the one against the Panthers, where you guys scored more tries, or just as many tries or more tries, but had an off day with the goal kicking. I think you kicked 1 from 5, and that ended up being...
Maybe they thought Adrian was kicking that day. We sort of looked like...
Oh, but wasn't it Eddie Ward? He gave away that penalty when Donk failed at the flop right under the post. So it wasn't you, D. It was bloody Donk.
Yeah. Look, we'll blame the referee. It makes more sense, right? But Daryl, I guess, what happened that day? What was off? Because I remember you as probably one of the best kickers of all time. So what happened that day compared to others?
I don't know, actually. I still can't. I try not to remember it, but I'm pleased everyone now wants to remember it from the Bears. We went to a luncheon a couple of years ago at North Sydney Leagues Club, and James Bracey was there, and he didn't realise I was in the audience. I was actually at Coff's table at Adrian's table.
Yeah, we're there together.
And he gave me interviewing Greg Alexander, who Greg kicked like 3 goals that day and was basically the difference. We go down by 2 points. And anyway, I felt so small at the table, and I was like, I just wanted to leave, you know what I mean? But anyway, I sort of held my space and got through the luncheon. But that goes with the territory, doesn't it? I don't know what happened. The week before, I'd copped the head knock against Manly. We'd beaten Manly the week before, and was sort of a little bit concussed. And I remember playing the second half a bit wishy-washy, and I think I kicked a goal from out wide later in that game after being concussed, but I was fully alert that day against Penrith and just couldn't even strike him. I've only watched it a couple of times, and a couple of the kicks were just horrible. I just didn't even strike him well. So yeah, I actually try not to remember too. When you're a goal kicker, you try and remember all the positive moments, and you try and shelve your disappointments real quickly. So yeah, that'll be the last we talk about it.
I think it's important. We'll wrap it up there. But I want to talk about where you started before the Bears. And Daryl, you already mentioned that you switched from rugby union, so you played for Waikato over there, and then came across to league. How did that come about? Did you know much about league at the time, and how did the Bears find you?
When Phil Cup was just really starting to get into a rhythm in New Zealand, and Tina Turner, the advert there, Simply the Best, was sort of raging. What's his name? Steve Martin come across the Tasman to look at a guy called Paul Simonson, who's Bailey Simonson's dad.
Yep.
And signed Bailey. And I played fullback today. He watched a game of rugby union, and Paul played on the wing. Paul scored a couple of tries. And at the after-match function, he came up afterwards and said, never thought of league. And next day, we had a bit of a chat. in a hotel room. He was telling me that he was signing Paul. I had a chat to Paul. And then Paul and I came over and watched the grand final of 1990.
Yeah.
And I actually went home. I said no, actually. I said no. And then I missed out on an All Black tour at the end of the year to France. And then I turned around and said yes. So Paul and I rocked up in the pre-season, did a full pre-season. I was massive in the gym. I mean, Adrian and Gab Jones and Mario Fennick and all those guys, they were whacking out 160 kilo, and I couldn't bench press 20 kilos on each end of the bar. Like, I can remember Pat Jarvis and puffing it, going, "You're a disgrace. Get out of here until we're finished."
And you're a winger, mate. A winger. So that's no, which was as expected.
It's probably, I was going to say, it was probably what was expected back in the day from the wingers. Yeah. They're probably much bigger nowadays.
That's right. Adrian, in those days, like, you'd get off the bus and you'd see, oh, there's a halfback, oh, they're the wingers. And now these days they go off, they're all 6'4" and 120 kilos. There's no weight difference, just the speed.
Exactly.
Which I like to bit of that too.
Yeah.
Adrian, yourself, you were a bit of a code hopper as well. I understand, obviously, growing up in Forbes. I hear that you played soccer originally, and then how did you find league, and how did you find yourself at the Bears?
I went to a school, Red Bend Catholic College out at Forbes, which is a very much a league school. It's a co-ed school, and by the time you get to year 12, you get a bit interested in girls, and I was a soccer boy, but no girls to go and watch the soccer, so I gave league a go. Didn't do much good at the school, but when I came down to Sydney, just the old man said, "Go off the farm for 6 months, see how the other half live." Turned up in Sydney, a few mates were already here, and they said, "Come and play leagues, best way to meet people in Sydney." And I ended up down at North Sydney Brothers, playing a bit of rugby league there, and then we went well, and I went okay, so I got asked to play President's Cup the following year. I went well there. We got to the grand final on that one. We lost that as well.
Yep.
And then I got asked to come down to grade the following year, so I was just right person, right spot, big enough, I could run okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The rest is history. And I guess you were there for a 10-year period, and you got to see, I guess, when you started, the Bears were kind of the whipping boys of the league. But by the end, you were a real premiership threat. Talk us through that and the transition and sort of what happened over that period that sort of turned things around for the club.
Well, it was actually 11 years. So in 85 when I started, the coach we had was Greg Haywick.
Yep.
And he lasted about half a season. And we had Chicken Norton, then he lasted a little bit. Then it was Frank Stanton. So Frank Stanton was probably the turning point. It was to start becoming a bit professional. And that when we first started, it was training Tuesday night, Thursday night, compulsory, everybody over the pub. And that was it. That was an ARL side. That was two training sessions, no gym, no skills, just a team, all the whole club together on Tuesday, and then your teams on Thursday, and then play on Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the Bears that got professional in the mid to late 80s. It was the whole game became professional. You touch on Tina Turner, you've touched on, we talk about the perception, and then as other things come along, the game was going well on TV. TV started to have not just the Saturday, this you watch Saturday game on a Saturday afternoon on the ABC, and that was about it. Then they got a few more games, so money started coming in the game, people getting paid. You didn't have to, a lot of people started not having to work, they become professional rugby league players. So it all evolved in money, TV, and they wanted to see a good product. So that helped the Bears evolve. And we had a couple of very good, astute managers like David Hill came along. So David Hill was instrumental into changing, evolving the Bears, getting good sponsorship, getting people to the game. We'd have a band there. You remember the band, DJ? We'd have the Kalani Heights band. Yeah, they were playing the whole time. So it was a great day at Bear Park. So yeah, it was just really evolved from when we'd go down there when I first started. It'd be 1,500 people at Bear Park, and it's they'd leave just before full halftime on the first grade game because they're getting smashed. So
yeah.
Well, my first game in North Sydney Oval in '91, we played Canberra, who had won the comp the year before, and Linda thought it was fantastic because the crowd was just chock-a-block full, and some of the guys were well dressed and wearing like a jacket with the little tartan arm sleeves on, and then you pop over for a beer to Percy's after the game, and it was like a glorified game rugby union for us Kiwis back home, and a real big event, you know what I mean? And it was top shelf. And then the next week we played West out at Campbelltown on the Dust Bowl. And we'd never been to Campbelltown, Linda and I. And so we got dragged around the hard bloody field there and that. I come off with grazes everywhere. And I can remember coming home and said, oh, we picked the right part of Sydney to come to.
Yeah.
We come to the Bears. But it was a really good start that year, wasn't it? 91, because you'd got the likes of Jacko. I think, did Pat Jarvis come that year? Phil Blake arrived. Had a real influx of players from all the hard work you guys done in the late 80s.
Yeah, and because we had money too. Bears had some money, which was very important. So they were able to compete with what David Hill did to the club by transforming it. We were able to attract big name players. So,
what were some of the memories? Like, which games did you get up for the most? We know about the rivalry with Manly, but you mentioned West there, Daryl, as well. What were sort of the highlights that you remember? I'll start with you, Adrian, in your career. What would be the biggest moment for you?
I'll be honest, I don't recall a lot of games. I don't watch any more my games. Manly, just loved playing Manly, but you just loved to play Manly because it was just I was actually, that was my first ever delve into playing first grade was against Manly. My old man had come down from Forbes to watch me have a game in 1985, and I was just 19, nearly 20-year-old kid. I was meant to be playing under 23s. Got pulled off at half-time, and Dad was a bit upset. Didn't know why I'd been pulled off. I didn't know why I'd been pulled off. And they said, you've got to sit on the bench for reserve grade. Sat on the bench for reserve grade. I ran on for the last 10 minutes. I said, they want you sitting aside for bench for first grade.
Oh, wow.
3 minutes in the game, Steve Hansen, God bless him, went off injured with a head knock. Toole, you're on. I thought, oh my God, there I was playing Maxi Kulich, Noel Cleo, Cliffy Lyons, all these names that it was basically the whole Australian side. So
wow.
It was great. But just every time you got to play Manly, we hated them, they hated us, but we were best mates off the field. But it was just that real arch rival, the spectators just made that cauldron. We had one night there at Bear Park, we had 22,000 people when we were playing Manly. It was just amazing.
It's something we kind of miss, that rivalry, and it's funny you mentioned you don't remember many of the games. Do you think that has anything to do with the head knock with Mario?
No. I had to go back on. They bloody stitched me up, taped me up and said, get back out there. So but Mario was smart. He stayed off. So. Yeah, I do get concerned a little bit, but no, I think I've been pretty good. I've kept the brain pretty well utilised. I've finished footy, so.
It sounds like it, mate. It does.
I've got a quick story with Puff. I hope he remembers it too, because I go back to 91. So once I left and went to Canterbury in 94, I'd actually stayed living on the north side, and I was up at Monavale, and we bought a house, my wife and I, and we're about to knock it down, but we lived in it for a year. And it was a sort of bit of a derelict old house up there, and like we let the kids draw on the wallpaper and that because we knew we were sort of going to knock the house down. And then one night Adrian comes around and grabs a paintbrush from downstairs and painted a set of goalposts on my living room wall. Okay. And then painted all the missed kicks I missed from 1991. It honestly stayed there for about 8 months.
Yeah.
And people would walk into my house and they'd see the set of goalposts, pretty raggedy sort of set of goalposts, and all these shots missing for this goal. And do you remember that, Paul?
Yeah, I surely do, mate. And yeah.
So it stayed with us, which was good. Then we finally bowled the house over and got rid of them. So,
should have taken a photo, painted it. It would have been excellent. It's funny, the boys obviously rib you a lot, Daryl, about those missed kicks in 91, but really, honestly, I remember you as probably one of the greatest of all time. And am I right in saying that you were one of the first that started kicking with the plastic kicking tee? Did you introduce that to the sport pretty much?
I think a kicking tee had been introduced before I started using that. And I'd had a couple of people sort of throw me a couple of bits of plastic and say, would you use this? You know what I mean? But we're still using sawdust at North Sydney Oval. I remember using sawdust because we weren't allowed to use sand on the cricket pitch. Peter Devlin would have a heart attack. And he still would, Devo. But so, and then kicking tees came in sort of mid-90s, and then I found one that I liked, and sort of since then I've been pretty heavily involved in manufacture of them. But
Yeah.
I don't know whether I was the first. There would have been a couple of others going past there as well.
But
I don't know, Adrian, I remember my first year of North Sydney when I was over with Paul Simonson and that, and I was giving a couple of guys a ride to training one day, and I got mixed up on the Bradfield Highway and that, and I was only coming from in behind the Oaks at Camaray, and all of a sudden it was Friday afternoon. I don't know if you were in the car or not, but I ended up on the Harbour Bridge, and I'm going into town. Jacko was in the car for sure. I know Jacko, because Jacko's going, "Chuck, you're nuts, we're going to be late, what are we going to do?" You know what I mean? He's screaming like Peter Jackson would. And then he said, and Jacko went, "I bet you won't do a U-turn on the Harbour Bridge, on the Sydney Harbour Bridge."
Yeah.
And so I thought, oh, well, there's a challenge, you know what I mean? And sure enough, I went right across it to the far end where the booths were on the other side. So what's that, coming north? And I sort of tooted my horn really, really loud, and the car over there stopped. I quickly went, and turn around and come back, and all the boys, Jacko, cheering out, "Yeah, got the training on time." But yeah, so famous for a U-turn on the Harbour Bridge about 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Never done before.
First time for everything. It's pretty, it must have been pretty dangerous. But one question I've always wanted to ask you, Daryl, as well, was obviously when you retired, you had the most points of any NRL player. I think it was 2,034. But I find it really interesting that your predecessors at the Bears and the Bulldogs, Jason Taylor and Hazem El Masri, also two of the greatest kickers of all time. Surely they learned some tricks from you.
Oh, I don't know. I certainly had Hazem there at the Dogs for a long time underneath. You know, he was younger than I, and he was the next one coming through. Jason Taylor had done all his work at West before he came to North, and when Jason came, I left. So Jason arrived in 94, I left in 94. So the Taylor certainly, you know, wasn't involved with Jason's kicking. But yeah, it was sort of like just a little bit of a synchronise it. So those guys went on to become, you know, pretty handy goal kickers. Yeah. So, but I mean, for me, I had to kick goals. You know what I mean? Didn't have a rite of passage into the team unless I was a goal kicker.
Yeah.
I certainly, my first year at North Sydney, I kicked 67%. And that in 91, that was thought to be pretty good. If you go back through the history books, and like 67% now, I mean, you don't get a start. No. And so that just shows you how quickly the goal kicking improved in the next decade. Guys were already coming around the corner: Matthew Ridge, Jason Taylor, and of course then, you know, you get on to Hazems and Cameron Smiths and Andrew Johns and some far more talented people than us. But yeah, it's just a progression of goal kicking.
How do you think you'd compare today to some of the players
I'd
today?
still beat them.
Yeah, who stands out to you? Who do you think is probably the best kicker around at the moment?
Right now, Nathan Cleary is pretty hard to go past. I think Jared Croker's had a really good time of it and continues to have a good time of it. You know, Zach Lomax says on their given day, you know, they're that good that, you know, someone's going to kick 10 out of 10 one day or 9 from 10 and what have you. So you can't really, unless you sort of like grab the stats at the end of the year, and you can probably pick the best percentage over maybe 100 attempts at goal and come up with someone who's going to get close to 90 and give them the tick for the year. But I think those guys are probably the best. But I mean, Adrian will too. I mean, I'd worked pretty hard back in the day. I think I would have been one of the hard workers.
Yeah, you did a lot of hard work. I remember you constantly practicing there an hour before, an hour after. Go on days off, you'd be down there kicking goals. Paul Lind would be off chasing balls everywhere. But yeah, did a lot of hard work. So these guys must be doing a bucket load extra training. Must be putting in so many just to be up at where you're at 67% and they're up in their 90s.
Well, they've got to do. I reckon they've got to do at least 100 attempts during the week to kick 5 on the weekend, is what a good goal kicker should. And there's no saying that you can't do any more. You can't do more than that. So if you want to break 100 down, you can do 3 lots of 30, 2 lots of 50. You know, you can even go a little bit more. But you mentioned Linda kicking the balls back, and so Linda, my wife, used to kick the balls back at North Sydney Oval. You know what I mean? And she gave me some advice too. You know what I mean, on goal kicking, which is fantastic.
Great
But
to
I
have
soon
a
worked
partner
out. I
like that.
soon worked out that if you miss. So when I missed one, she'd sort of walk forward with a couple of the other balls and want to have a chat about the one I missed. So then I'd purposely miss 2 or 3 right to the far corner and make her go for a bloody good walk, so I couldn't hit her.
Yeah.
Then I'd quickly kick the next one, so she had to go over there, so I could keep her away from giving me too much advice. So yeah,
It's a good strategy, good tactic.
you learn when you're doing things.
What about you, Adrian? We know how Daryl thinks he'd compare to the kickers of today, but you're one of the tough guys. There's plenty of tough guys in the game today. Who do you think's the toughest, and where would you sit these days?
They're all tough. They're all bloody tough. The game is so much more physical. So much. They're bigger. They've got 10 meters. We had 5 to 7 meters. I think it was the rule. So if they wanted to get rid of these head knocks, all you got to do is go back to 5 meters, and no more head knocks would happen, because it doesn't give people time to, if they tackle standing up. In toughness, oh mate, different game, different eras. It's too hard to say, but I think anyone who plays the game's pretty tough. I don't want to individualise anyone. I think they're all tough out there at the moment in the forwards.
Yeah.
I think in the 90s, and what we really enjoyed, Adrian, is the camaraderie, like in those years. I mean, you had more years at the Bears than I did, but my 3 years at the Bears, guys like, Jacko, Tony Ray, and all those sort of guys, Gav, Lobster, Mark.
We had a great, we had
we had fun, you know what I mean? I can remember being over at Percy's often, after a video session, and Steve Martin might have smashed the VCR on the bloody, the cassette on the VCR, and said, right, I get over to the pub and have a beer. You know what I mean? And like, you don't do that now. You know what I mean? Or after the game, you'd hook up with the opposition team over at Percy's and catch a few beers before they shot on the bus or headed off home. You know what I mean? So it was a really social time, I think, and that built with a really good group. It was fantastic.
We had a lot of great people. We didn't have any dickheads in our group, I don't think, in our club at that time, which is so important. We were very strong together, very strong.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, Deej. I don't know if you remember, there's when we beat Manly in that first semi-final, we were over there all having a few beers, and Jacko probably had a couple more than most of us, and thought he'd still drive home. He's going down Spit Bridge, and they do the transit lane. They move the lanes across. They have the truck that goes along with the little siren, little flashing light on top. He saw that as he was coming down the hill cover. So he saw this, and he thought it was the cops. So he thought, bugger this, I'm pulling over. Parked in the car park, and this, got a taxi back over to Curly. He lived here at Curly. And he thought, I'll go up to the pub up here at the Harbour Hill, and that's where the Manly boys, because we beat them the week prior. They were up there having a few beers as well. So Jacko's having a few more beers and end up being a bit late night. Next morning he gets up. Oh, that's right, I left my car at training at North Sydney Oval. That's what he thought. So he gets over to North Sydney Oval, couldn't find his car anywhere. Rang the police and reported his car lost. Stolen. And then they rang him back a couple of hours later. They'd found it. Someone had driven it away from North Sydney Oval on him and parked it down at the Spit. So, yeah, it was he told it a lot funnier than that, but it was one of those amusing things we had with Jacko.
He was the best character, Peter Jackson.
It was amazing.
We've been at his place for dinner a couple of times with like Flo and Puff and the guys and whatever, and all of a sudden he'd go, it was a barbecue one night, and Conno, I think, was there too, and Kissy. And then all of a sudden the boys come out and said, oh, we're off down the pub. And I said, what do you mean we're off down the pub? And they said, oh, well, Jacko reckons this is a boring barbecue, so all the boys are going to bugger off to the pub. You can't walk out on someone's barbecue or your own barbecue just because you think it's boring and leave all the kids and the girls behind. And so he was such a character. It was fun. I wasn't allowed to go. I don't know whether they actually went to him. So he was fun.
Yeah, but I don't know what the camaraderie is like these days with the clubs. It probably is. They might be similar. They might get on, but we were very, very close back in the early 90s. And I still catch up quite regularly with a lot of the guys from the 80s. We actually had a good get together a few weeks, a couple months ago. We went out to dinner with Donnie McKinnon, Andy Simons, Mark Graham, Jeff Blinkhorn down at the Oaks Hotel. Yeah, a couple of months ago when we could go out. It was quite good to catch up. We just sort of had dinner there.
Yeah.
They were a good crew. Like even after I left, Jason Taylor and those guys had some success, building into 98 and around that off the back of Joshy Stewart and few of the other guys there with the club. So yeah, I mean, and even those guys had a really good, you know, character and, you know, team spirit and what have you. So it just ebbs and flows. I mean, the most difficult thing about it is that, you know, like probably in the early 90s and in that building we were, you know, we could have probably gone close to winning a comp, and they could have gone close to winning a comp too, you know, in the mid to late 90s when they featured in a few semis as well. So that's but that's the lay of the land, isn't it? It's how it goes, and it's still good to see them involved now. I mean, Flo's done a great job to keep and not only Flo, other people as well, to keep the Bears alive.
Certainly, and it's a good place. It's a good spot to end off, I guess. I love hearing the stories, and once the more of you legends that I speak to, there always gets a point in the conversation where I can sort of disappear and just listen to you guys talking about the stuff you used to get up to. And sometimes it's cryptic, you know, there might be a few stories you can't tell, but we certainly understand that and we appreciate it. But I guess finally, you know, the camaraderie at the Bears was fantastic. Everything I hear, you know, it's just such a great club. Where do you guys sit on, and we'll start with you, Daryl, but where do you sit on the future for the Bears? You know, do you see a pathway to the top again, or do you see them doing well in development at New South Wales Cup level? What do you want to see for the Bears, and where do the Bears need to be, you know, from a rugby league in Australia sort of perspective?
Yeah, I guess the longer you're out of the limelight, the harder it's going to be to get back there, to be a realist. I mean, you know, like if we had a crystal ball, we'd just love them to be back in first grade playing out of North Sydney Oval. But with the reduction of teams, currently looks like the future is going to be more teams in Queensland than New South Wales, and a couple moving out of New South Wales doesn't sort of paint a picture for New South Wales representation. But who knows, they might you know, be part of something that comes in new in the next couple of years, and I guess you know, the Bears will be big enough to embrace that after the past few years. It hasn't been lean. I mean, they've always had representation, obviously, as feeder clubs to some of the other clubs, but to stand alone again might not be the case. But you never know. We could, there's good rich history there, and hopefully it can, you know, be encompassed by someone at some stage at the top level again. You know, I don't know how that looks or what it looks like, but yeah, hopefully.
What about you, Adrian? Is there a future outside of North Sydney, or is it always it is what it is now, and we just need to embrace that past and keep developing in juniors?
Well, it is what it is now. But the only way I could see, if there was, you know, when the Titans were struggling there a couple of years ago, if we could sort of get them to the Gold Coast become the Gold Coast Bears, or a new side comes in and they're called they have the Bears. They don't have to wear red back. They're the Bears. Every time they come to Sydney, they'd have a supporter base to start with. They could play 1 or 2 games at Bear Park, as long as one of them was Manly. You'd get a full house. But you know, that's the only way I can see them coming back into any sort of form, is to have a club based in Queensland or wherever it is that's called the Bears, and they've got a ready-made tour, you know, base here in Sydney to support them when they play rugby. Other than that, I think it's, sorry to say, but it's a long road to get back to the top, and I don't with it. They haven't got the kids. It's just too hard.
Yeah. Well, the memories are there, and the club can still be very proud, and that's why I love doing these. And the Bears fans are still very pumped and excited to hear from gentlemen such as yourselves. So, Adrian Toole, Daryl Halligan, thank you for spending half an hour with me and the Bears fans. It's been fantastic, boys. So, thank you very much.
Always fun, mate. Always been a fun time with the Bears. Every time I think about North Sydney Bears, you know, I just think it's good fun. So, well done.
Great times. See you, Deej.
Yeah, mate. Let's catch up. We're not allowed to catch up at the moment, but we'll make a point of it.
Yeah. So you're living in NZ, are you, full time, or you?
No. I'm here in Manly at the moment.
Okay.
So, no, we'll go back at some stage, Linda and I, but we're stuck here for a little while now. So, but yeah.
When we get out, let's catch up for an ale.
Oh, for sure.